This is the Shadow Chronicles podcast. We are here to take a deep dive into the inner work, generational trauma, and your shadows. Having those hard conversations so you don't have to. You know, all of that shit that just does not get spoken about. In the third drawer down, in the dark, hidden away. My name is Sky, and I'm a shadow integration specialist. I am here to help guide you on your journey to unfuck yourself by integrating your shadows, healing the generational trauma, so you can vibrate with confidence and just fucking love your life.
And my name is Todd, who's an integrative health coach. I help people own more of who they are, change their lives on many different levels to become who they really are. Find your compass and follow it, to say it simply.
And welcome back. And I'm actually really fucking excited. I feel like we're now diving into all of the cool shit after the first few episodes. Just sort of everyone getting to know us. So putting the toe in the water.
Vague hints about what we're talking about.
Yeah, right. You know, putting your toe in the water to see if, you know, this podcast will be beneficial to your life or someone that you may know.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of whether you find my voice annoying and not annoying enough to want to listen to it and apply it to yourself. Anyway.
Right. So we're going to take a deep dive in today into like how and why anger is a vital part of your healing, which is super fucking epic. So
Why is that, Scott?
Why
Why is it super fucking epic?
it is. Well, a lot of like with my own healing, a lot of the clients I work with, a lot of people that I speak to, all of these sort of things. We've been, especially for women, as we mentioned in our last episode, a lot of women were conditioned for generations to not express anger, to be quiet, to be small, to not be difficult, to be polite, to be, you know, the good little girl. And that in itself...
I have a passive-aggressive question.
Yes.
Is that why women are really good at passive aggression themselves?
Quite possibly.
Because you've got to sublimate your anger in some way. You can't just be consumed by it.
Mm.
It just comes out different.
Yeah, quite possibly. That's
Something to think about.
Yeah, that's a really good question. But
Sorry, I was biting my tongue the whole time.
I
Thinking,
know,
like,
right?
I'm just about to ruin this for you.
don't ruin it for me. No, this is okay. This is what we're here for. We're here to have these really cool conversations and look at all different angles and aspects and points of view. Like, I am a woman, so my point of view is going to be completely different to yours because you are looking through a lens from a completely different camera, essentially.
Yeah.
But in the patterns that I've discovered, as well as like, you know, doing the work and healing the past lives and the past generations and all that sort of stuff, there's a lot of like, be small, don't rock the boat, don't, you know, like don't express your feelings or whatever the case may be. So a lot of the times that things like anger and frustration and all that sort of stuff, it gets kind of smushed down.
Yeah. Be seen and not heard.
Right. So, you know, don't you dare like say that something pisses you off or, you know, you want this or that or anything else. You just need to like sit down, shut up and take it.
I have a genuine personal question. for
Yeah.
you.
Oh, we're getting personal now.
Have you ever been told those things? Like just bold-faced, out and out, you're not allowed to ask for those things.
That's a good question.
I'm curious because
yeah.
is there an internal, like, you know what, this is not the time to start this particular conversation? But I'm always curious. Like my inclination is to push back a little bit, not because I want to add more to the diminishment of your own emotions and how you feel as a woman. It's more like, is this what you were literally told, or was this the internalized message of the behaviors and the insinuations and things like this that have effectively become that?
So,
It's almost like that, what I said about, like, it's not out and out ball-faced anger. It's a sublimated version of that, like passive aggression that is almost more insidious and more effective at limiting you and how you feel and how you express that.
Right. So, yeah, thinking back, I don't think I was ever specifically told out and out that I wasn't allowed those things. But every time that I got angry at something, I was punished for it. And like, even if it was a case of trying to like advocate for myself or share my stories like a child, like, I didn't do that, or, and it's like, don't take that tone with me. You're not allowed to be angry with me.
And that's the other bit I was curious about. Like those two comments there. It's not that you're not allowed to be angry, but you're not allowed to be angry at me.
Right.
And weirdly, when you're that little girl and you go,
who the fuck
I guess I'm not allowed to be angry.
Right.
Because you're the central focal point of my universe. Where else do I put it?
Exactly. Or like inside.
Yeah.
And then, as a lot of children in like my generation and possibly your generation as well, pretty sure it's the same fucking generation.
Yeah, calm down.
Like when we had like temper tantrums or anger outbursts or anything like that, we were like thrown into our room to deal with it ourselves, which essentially internally tells you that you're not allowed to have this. You are being punished for it. So, like as you said, what actually happens when you hear those comments of like, you're not allowed to be angry or you're not allowed to be angry at me, you internalize that as, well, I'm not allowed to be angry. And when you grow up as like, when you become an adult, all your relationships are based upon the relationship you had with your parents until a such point in time when you change and break that cycle.
It's your version of masculinity from your dad. It's your version of like femininity from your mum.
Right.
It's like that's all the reference point you've really got until TV becomes a big enough deal, and that's a whole other fucking Disney princess kettle of fish.
Right. So so as a child, for me personally, yes, I was told those things, but then also as a child, for me personally, I grew up in an environment with, what you would call like a narcissist for a father. And so there was a lot of anger in my household, and I never heard any of that rage or outrage or anything like that coming from my mum. So my mum was incredibly dissociated and shut down, like as we spoke about in our last episode, that real disconnection. So you then learn that, well, that is okay for one side of it. And this is just a mass generalization. I know this doesn't cover for everybody. You learn that, oh, well, that's okay, but I'm not allowed to because they're not. And
Mum's not, so I'm not.
Exactly. And every time that I do, I get in trouble for it, because at the end of the day, that is incredibly triggering for my parents.
I'm about to ask another annoying question then.
Yeah.
Was your mum trying to give you this survival mechanic, inverted commas, of mitigating your anger so as not to trigger the far more volatile parent to almost not to suppress you, but to almost in a weird, wild way keep you safe? Because if you directed that anger at him, what would you get back?
A lot of it back.
That's
yeah.
So like her version of safe was don't
rock the boat, be small, don't be quiet, be small, be polite,
And whether that's a family unit or a societal thing or how you make sense of yourself in how you feel about those things from moment to moment.
Right. Yeah, that's it. So quite potentially that could have been the case. Quite potentially it may not have been the case either, because
it's speculative.
Yeah,
sort of.
And it's an amazing point, because when I think about it, you're right, because if I did direct any of my childhood emotions, granted a lot of us are running around with childhood emotions.
They're human emotions, childhood or not.
I would have gotten 10 times worth back, but in the same point, I always got 10 times worse back from my mother as well, because I was smaller. And
if she can't express her emotion to him, sorry, you're the next best target.
Right. The parent of the family who was the child. Good times.
I ask these questions because I think they're quite relevant to like how anger is integral to healing. Now, whether that's because you feel it finally and it works for you, or whether it's because it provides the motivation by which to do some shit that needs doing.
It's pretty much both of those things. So, yeah, when we get so far suppressed and disconnected and you end up following the cycle. So, like, unless you make a change, you will always follow the pattern that you've been programmed to do. It's exactly what I did when I moved out of home. I ended up in my first serious relationship, who was literally like exactly the same as my father. Like,
how weird.
Yeah, that's it, right? And I believe everyone gets to a point where they just go, fuck this shit, I'm done. And it's almost like a little, like as you said, like that motivation, that fire that gets kicked off to get shit done. And I always like to recognize it because I know when it happens for my clients and I know when it happened for me, it can be quite scary because remember, you've been conditioned that this is bad, you're going to get in trouble. And all of the limiting beliefs, all of the self-worth, all of the things that come up that say if you like rock the boat, if you become loud, if you do this, no one's going to love you. And
I was even going to say you're going to do some damage because you saw what anger does in that archetype.
Yeah.
And you're not going to love yourself, let alone have anyone else think that.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like that arc, that spark that goes, I am worth more than this. You need to stop and you need to listen to me. And if you don't, you blow up and you do damage. I've done that too. But it's that point of going, hang on a minute, like, I'm not worth this treatment. I'm not worth this, I'm worth so much more than this. And it's almost that like remembrance of how to place boundaries down, how to say no, how to be loud, how to start speaking up for yourself.
A couple of episodes ago when we were talking about emotions being signposts, is literally what you're saying now, is that the whole point of anger is to tell you someone's crossed a boundary. Yeah. Someone's pushed a button and, Laura, this is what it looks like.
That's it. And what happens in a lot of like households or, and I say a lot because I know it's not everyone and especially for women because
it's varying degrees.
Because when you are taught that no, you're not allowed to be angry or you're not allowed to be angry at me or you get in trouble for expressing that, you get in trouble for saying no, you get in trouble for, all of those sort of things. When you shut that down, you shut down that part of you, your intuition, your gut instinct almost that says something is not right. You need to do something, or I don't want to do this. You need to say no, or I don't agree with this. This doesn't align with me. This doesn't align with my values. Whatever the case may be, you shut that down, which is how you become very manipulated or manipulatable, because I speak proper English.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, because if you've shut all that down, then all the people that are over-expressing that anger and very manipulative and very, because you got to remember, like, when we take it back to the shadow, if you have shut all of that shit down, you are going, like, all the people in your life, because you follow the pattern of what you've been taught, are going to over-exaggerate it and, like, stomp all over you and stomp all over your boundaries and,
If I said that even then, it's almost got nothing to do on some level with their behavior and everything to do with how you perceive their behavior. Like you become hypersensitive to any behavior that even flirts with the line of a boundary.
Yeah.
Let alone actually crosses it and makes you, and they intentionally make you feel like a piece of shit or something like that. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
It's almost like it's the trigger that matters, not the behavior after a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So when, when a lot of my clients go through this phase of like, fuck you, fuck this, fuck that, I'm out type thing, like that whole, like, just I'm done, they get it like quite fearful of it because they're like, this is not me. And like, I've got to bring it back and go, actually, like a part of it is you. It's just that you've ignored it for so long and it
doesn't feel like you.
Yeah, and you're just so worn out and you're so tired and you that part is going, well, sit down, we're taking over now, and it kicks off.
She's an ex.
Yeah.
But she'll ring me every 4, 5, 6 months. Because she asked me for help on figuring out why she's the way she is, right? But this is a conversation I've had with her.
Yeah.
Is that she would literally say, I'm in myself, watching myself do some shit that I don't want to. I'm saying stuff, I'm doing stuff that she's almost conscious of herself going, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I know where this goes. I can't stand this shit. But because that's the conditioning that she has, she feels so unenabled to manage her own behavior once it crosses a certain level of line, that she's just got these reactive control dramas that play out that she doesn't want anymore, but has been suppressed for so long that once the lid is let off, it's the proverbial Pandora's box. And then there's the shame spiral on the other side of it going, oh, so why did I do that? Why is this who I am? Why am I ruining this or whatever it happens to be, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the compulsion to jam everything back into the shadow. The seeming inability to control anything on the other side of letting some anger out.
Yeah.
Like that that's a daunting, scary prospect. It's like, I have no control of what this looks like when it comes out. So I could get why that would be
daunting, scary.
The greater of two evils almost.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's how people stay stuck, right?
Right. So then you'd imagine what would actually happen if you did let that out when it is being called to be let out. So when you start listening to your gut instinct, when you start listening to your own intuition, when you start actually living within your values, living within your worth, what would actually happen if you did just place those boundaries down when they need to be placed? Yes, if you've just started boundary work, they're going to be uncomfortable as fuck. And
they're going to move.
And that's
they're going to break.
And, it's a practice, it's a learning process. But what if you actually started listening to that and then started voicing where you need to voice, started opening your throat chakra where you needed to? You're going to be less likely to, get to the other end of Pandora's box, open that fucker and then just go boom, and then end up in that shame spiral afterwards because you've smushed it and you smushed it and you smushed it and you smushed it and you smushed it until it can't be smushed anymore.
And then it becomes a proverbial black hole.
Right. And this is...
So I just realised you're making a singularity out of your own damn volatile emotions. You're cool. Swallows everything in.
Swallows everything.
Yeah. Sorry, before we press record, we were talking about the thing that I find most fascinating about shadow work, which is the necessity of integrating the parts of you that would, by most people, describe as a monster. Like Jordan Peterson, for example, that's how it is. So I read books like The Gulag Archipelago and Mein Kampf.
There's some interesting fucking books.
I swear, educational purposes. But the point of reading those is to get a clearer handle on exactly how far humanity and humans in general can go when they're trying to control themselves and the people around them in phenomenally unhealthy ways and ignoring the root cause of why that's a thing.
Yeah.
And that's obviously like a huge, big, it's only episode 6 and I brought off Adolf Hitler already.
Go on.
But that is the example of that's what it looks like when the phenomenally extreme version of this stuff that we're talking about goes proper wrong.
Yeah.
Like genocide. It's a thing.
Yeah. That's it. I know you have an interesting book collection.
I do. Because it's pretty polarized. There's those books and there's comic books everywhere and all sorts of stuff. Don't mind me. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all right. I was very fascinated by your book collection too. Like, interesting choice of words or interesting choice of reads, essentially.
Well,
but
you know, like
on the flip side, I like what you read, I watch in documentaries because that's just how I learn. That's how I intake information. And like the same thing, I'm like, my superpower is patterns, you know, and it's like I watch these stuff and go, okay, how did this person become to there? What happened beforehand? Where's the pattern?
Well, that is the reason why I have that book on my coffee table. It's like, how did that man get to that place? And it's going to be a shadow conversation. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but it seems like long odds that that's not the case.
Right.
Anyway.
And then exactly like how do you get to that place where you just snap and you just go, fuck this, I'm done. Yeah. And it's literally...
And you start World War II.
Hopefully not.
Sometimes literally.
Sometimes literally. It depends on how it comes out. Like a lot of, I'm very grateful and I'm very like a lot of the clients that I work with, it's not been World War II. It's literally just been, I'm so fucking like Sky, I'm so fucking angry right now. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, awesome.
You're pinwheeling.
Let's go.
Where do I point this?
Yeah. And so I'm like, let's go. And when I am able to reframe that and go, and this is like a super important pivotal part in your healing journey right now. And they're like, how the fuck is this like an important part of a healing journey? I'm like, because you are literally now in that space of I am worth more, let's go. So you are now in that space of willingness to let go of all of the shit that you've been taught, programmed, whatever the case may be, and are there to like move, to start unlearning to relearn.
You've got something to confront that old bullshit with.
Yeah.
So when it comes to vibrational frequencies and all that sort of stuff, right? Like, you know how there's frequencies that are associated with certain specific emotions.
Yeah.
So I think it's guilt and shame and apathy.
They're very
are
low.
all lower vibrations than anger.
Yeah.
And this is why anger is important, is because without it, you can't transcend those guilt, shame, apathy. Because I think even revenge is slightly higher than anger, but that you could argue that revenge is the application of anger. I'm going to fucking get my own back.
Yeah.
Because at least it's doing something. As unproductive as it might superficially be, it's creating action.
Yeah.
It's compelling change.
That's it. And you need to, move up and you need to go through that space to be able to do that. And there needs to be like a catalyst or like a passing point, as you said. And that's it. You need to move through anger to then go up into things like, as you said, like revenge. And even that can be fucking reframed. Yeah. Because like, honestly, like if we're dealing with like toxic relationships, if we're dealing with toxic parents, if we're dealing with all of that shit, the best revenge is literally thriving and loving your life. You don't even need to fucking worry about what they're doing, being angry at them or anything like that. You are just like living your best life because you've done the work and you're like, you don't even fucking bother me anymore. Like,
The old eye for an eye.
Yeah.
It's the reason that works is because it's to discourage the person in front of you from doing something again, not the threat of what you're necessarily going to do. Because the real revenge is exactly what you just described. It isn't taking their eye because they took yours. Yeah. It's transcending the, I can't believe I'm about to use this word, transcending the pettiness of wanting to get them back for what they did to you. But that requires you to go through anger to want to balance the scales of the universe so that it's not continually shitting on you.
Right. And when it happens, a lot of that balance of the scales we've just said is a lot to do with self. It's like from a lot of the people that I've spoken to, even myself, for example, when I went through it, like I believe a lot of it doesn't come from like, fuck you, I'm going to, sneak into your house and stab you.
Sometimes it happens like that.
Sometimes it happens like that. That's when it like over exaggerates and like World War II starts. But it's a place of like, well, I'm worth more. I'm going to make a change, and I'm not going to make a change for you. I'm going to make a change for me because I deserve more. And like, what a cool place to be there.
The eye for an eye stuff. What you just said in terms of I'm going to make a change, not for you, but for me. It's like you kind of got to change to sort of get them to back off, which is why I was sort of saying that's the threat. It's like you're changing to get them to back up so you have space to grow and change into, as opposed to being as shitty as they are.
Right.
That's a bit judgy, but you know what I mean.
No, but human beings all operate on different energy levels. Like, as you just said, there's a fantastic book. It's called Transcending Energy. If you haven't read it, it's really cool. But
we don't get kickbacks, by the way.
No, I don't. But no, honestly, this book in itself really helped me in a space of my mother wound. So it was like explaining that all human beings, we all live on different levels of energy. There is nothing wrong with that. It is just different. And when you transcend, or when you go on your journey, you naturally transcend energy. So when you hit that point of like, you know, the pain of staying the same no longer outweighs the pain of change, then change can occur. So you can start moving through that pain to create that change. That rhymed.
You need to wear a cool cat in the hat.
I know, right? You will transcend at levels of energy, which means that you're no longer going to be on the same level as the person that hurt you, like whatever the case may be. You're no longer going to be there. That will come with a period of shit because they're going to try and bring you back down.
Bucket of crabs.
Bucket of crabs. And
have we actually explained that metaphor yet?
No, we haven't, but it's a fantastic one. Off you go.
Dude's walking down the beach. Sort of rocky outcrops along the beach. Sort of comes across this fella who's sort of just scooping crabs into a bucket with a crab net. Fella walking along, he sort of says, "Hey mate, there's some crabs trying to sort of crawl out of the bucket." Fellow doing the crab, he's like, "It's fine. They won't get out. It's fine." "What do you mean? It's halfway out, bro." So, no, watch. Without fail, didn't matter which crab it was, didn't matter what happened, a crab will get halfway up and all the other crabs in the bucket would reach up and drag the one that was getting out back in. Now, however way you want to view that metaphor, call it tall poppy syndrome or whatever sort of thing. The idea is that quite often your gang, posse,
relationship, family,
peeps,
whatever,
you ascending to a different level of vibration, energy, lifestyle is going to show them where they're failing or where they're stuck.
Hello, shadow.
And that's when it becomes that tall poppy syndrome where they'll try and hamstring you to keep you from leaving them.
Oh, you used to be so cool. Why are you not like...
Yeah. Why don't you drink anymore, bro?
Why don't you drink anymore?
Or something like that.
Oh, you're such a bitch now. Like, why the fuck are you, like this?
All of that shit.
All of that. Like, and I can guarantee everyone has heard that at some point in their life. You've changed. I don't like it. Cool, bro.
Well, you've stayed the same, so how are we winning?
That's it.
Even like that as the analogy, the bucket of crabs, even in a more positive way of framing it, let's just say you are getting out of the bucket. And one of your friends goes, "Oh, Sky's getting out. Maybe she can help me too." And they'll reach and grab onto you in the hopes that you can pull them along with you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, inevitably,
you fall back down. Because you can't pull someone to a different energy level. They need to.
Mate, I wish we could.
Right?
How much richer would we be?
Oh, fucking like.
As an example.
Right.
we're not going to talk about this too much right now, but change happens on 3 levels. Self as an environment. You can change yourself all you like, but if the people that you surround yourself with and the environment that triggers the old bullshit doesn't change, it's so much harder because your neurology and arguably the evolutionary biology of old patterns and the want to fit in is really hard to transcend. Not impossible, but just much more challenging than it would otherwise be if you forced the issue and got out of the bucket.
Exactly. And that's where that like analogy you're saying comes, is you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick, because ultimately you are trying, like, it's the foot on the brake and the gas pedal at the same time, and wondering why you're not getting anywhere, or you're looping.
You can make the decision to change, but changing in that place,
yeah. No, because you're going to come up against a whole lot, which means that when you do move through those energy levels, the people that are not meant for you, because remember, everyone lives on a different energy level, doesn't mean they're bad, doesn't mean they're wrong, doesn't mean anything.
What about that?
It just means that they are not the right energy for you. They will fall away. And like total left sideways tangent is the other thing that, like, I'm pretty sure 99.99% of us are conditioned, is that rejection is bad. And
I would argue that's an evolutionary biology thing again. That's effectively the threat of exile. What happens when you were exiled through pretty much everything but the last 150, 200 years of humankind? It's like you were dead.
Yeah.
If you had no other team to rely on, saber-toothed tigers or marauding Mongols or just plain old starvation and exposure got you.
Yeah.
So like rejection is the microcosm of exile. If they
That's
don't
it.
accept me, I'm out.
Exactly.
If I'm out, I'm done.
You know, and then like moving into modern society, that's where a lot of like judgment wounding, abandonment wounding and all that sort of stuff comes from, because that like root core of exile is
anxiety,
is still
I
there.
guess like that's the more modern example of it. It's like
Right.
you're anxious about not fitting in. You're anxious about doing dumb shit. You're anxious about being this, and everyone's going to point and laugh at you, and you're going to have to go home and change your name because now it's Nigel. No friends.
Yeah. And so when you have those two combined and you're in that environment where you're constantly being told that there's something wrong with you because you are changing, and then no one's going to love you because you are changing, it's very hard to stay in that mindset of growth and healing and like personal development and whatever, you know, it is for you, because you are constantly battled by the people around you and the environment that you're in.
So taking it back to the first,
Total tangent time.
we're built for it. It's what we do. Taking it back to the first 5 minutes, what we're talking about. If I said that quite often, not always, far from always, it's not like with that women conversation, not being present with the anger.
Yeah.
If I said that even with the relatively extreme version that you grew up in,
Yes.
the idea that it's often older women who tell you, no, toe the line, do this, do that, shut your mouth, blah, 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 blah. This is how we do it.
Yeah.
That is the more consistent conditioning of that, as opposed to the more extreme versions of shut up, woman, or I'll give you a backhand, or like that shit.
Yeah.
And if I said that that's because maybe they had all those wishes and wants and wanted to express themselves back in the day, but they got shamed into it and now they're getting their own back.
Yeah.
Bucket of crabs.
Bucket of crabs.
But just generational crabs.
Right.
So we talk a lot about self-awareness, but the ability to ask questions about why this person would say this thing to me. Why would they say, no, you're not allowed to say that. You don't get angry at me and all this sort of stuff. Like now, let alone when you were a kid, is yet again kind of core to how you're even remotely present with that, let alone being able to use that anger or whatever emotion it happens to be.
That's
to
it.
change.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're right, is the consistency of older generations, not all, not all, but
there's a tradition to it.
There's a tradition to it of, you know, that's it. Not allowed to express that. Don't do that. Yeah, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. And you're right, because like I believe, and on the flip side of it is when I have these women and these clients come through and they've gotten themselves out of a toxic relationship or an unhealthy relationship or just even a relationship that wasn't meant for them. And they've hit that point of anger and they've hit that point of going, I can't do this anymore. Something needs to change.
Yep.
And unfortunately, and the sad thing that I find a lot is that I have a lot of them coming to me saying that their mums are not agreeing with them. They're telling their adult children to go back to these unhealthy environments and that they are in the wrong for expressing their needs, placing those boundaries down and saying no to mistreatment, abuse, whatever the case may be. And like that even comes from like generational like trauma of like a lot of women when women were depowered, like, you know, witch burning trials, all of those sort of things, is that women were pitted against each other. And what happens when like a, you know, a gender, that's a good word for it, a gender is like pitted against each other for belief structures or whatever because one person decides to want to crawl out of the bucket.
Yeah.
Is that then nobody realizes their power. Nobody realizes their worth. No, everyone stays the same. Everyone, you know, which, and depending on the flip side of it, makes the other side a hell of a lot more comfortable. So that's it. When you have younger generations going, fuck this shit, I'm out. Like, you know, and then they're doing getting all the awareness and doing all the work going, holy fucking shit, like I'm like this because this is literally how I was brought up by my mum. And my mum was like this because she was brought up like that by her mum and so on and so forth. And they become...
I'll tell you a story about roasts in a second.
And these people become the cycle breakers.
Yeah.
That's very triggering for older generations.
You pesky black sheep, you.
Mate, I am the certified black sheep and scapegoat of the family. Those are all good things, by the way, not bad things.
There is a necessity in difference. How else does anything grow and evolve?
Right. So, yeah, so you're almost getting adversary from almost like both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it becomes a very confusing place to try and navigate. And
you don't want to be compliant. You've been told not to be defiant.
Yeah.
What else is there? This limbo land hellscape of neutrality and beigeness.
I was going to say, you're going to say beige.
Yeah.
That word has been in my head for like, you know, since we last recorded. I'm like, fucking beige. But that's it. Like when you're taught that beige is what life is supposed to be and you start to, you know, be red or purple or blue, then beige doesn't like that.
Damn uppity punks hair. Stupid dyed mohawk hairs.
Leave my hair alone. But that's it. So, like, bringing it back, look, this is how I believe that when we hit that point of that raw, primal rage, anger, it's like there is like an anatomy of healing in there, because an anatomy of integration in there.
It's a catalyst. It burnt, like, you need the incandescent rage to burn down old scaffolding to be the phoenix that you are.
You know,
forgive the mystical and fantastical, hopefully vaguely poetic
that's all
analogy.
right. I was going to say, like, you know, if burning down bridges doesn't...
The analogy I like to use is it's burning down old scaffolding that props you up into the shape that suits
them. Yeah. And you're sitting there with this massive hole in your chest going, I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel anything. I'm unhappy. I'm beige. You know, and that's it. You need to burn down that old scaffolding that's propping you up in the shape of what everyone else expects you to be or condition you to be, which has caused you to shut off all the doors, you know, to all of these aspects. It's caused you to shut off that part of you that like is reliant upon your gut to say, hey, there's something wrong. It's that part of you that's like, we need to place a boundary down here. Or that part of you that's willing to stand up and go, I am not going to be treated like XYZ. If you are going to be treating me like that, I'm fucking out of here.
I want to qualify though. Burning down something just for the sake of burning something, in my opinion, isn't a particularly valuable thing to do either.
That's not helpful either.
You know, like we could talk about traditional gender roles and all that sort of stuff, which is kind of what we've been talking about this whole time in terms of the proverbial scaffolding and all that sort of stuff. It's like misdirected anger that's no longer constructive and is lashing out just to be lashing out.
That's unhealthy anger. Or
I think we spoke about it last episode.
Dysregulation.
Like it makes things worse because then you've got alienation and ostracizement, because I still speak English as well. That means that you have no touch points anymore beyond your own anger. And that's where, like, as you say, it becomes quite toxic. It's just, it's harmful to you and the people around you, no matter how crabby in a bucket they are.
Well, that's it. And
just because you don't want to spend time with them doesn't mean you have to cook them in your own
project
rage.
Outward.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. And that's...
But it's a balance.
That's it. And that's a balance. And when we can use that as a healing... And that's when you learn as well, like self-regulation, acceptance of all emotions and stuff like that. That is like a pivotal healing point. When, like you were saying, you know, with your ex, how every so often something would happen and she'd just like completely dissociate from her body and like it's like looking over her doing
watching her do this wild shit.
Or watching her do all this wild shit. That is complete dysregulation. It means that you've like, you know, when you've hit the point, but instead of actually listening to the point, you've just like fucking barraged over the point. You've just kept on going.
And this is what I was meant by compliant and defiant.
Yeah.
Like you spend so long in compliance that you suppress. And then finally the lid comes off and you fly so far out the other side and you just defiant. You just end up, cooking yourself and everyone around it.
Well, that's it. It's, you spend, if you latch onto that and as I said, like, you know, miss the point and keep on fucking going, you latch onto that anger because, you know...
It feels good.
It feels good. And on top of that, like, you know, when you've spent a lifetime being compliant and the good little girl or the good little boy or whatever it is, you know, it's almost like you feel powerful. You feel... Even though you're not in fucking control, you feel like some way you are. But unfortunately what happens is
it's a controlled drama.
It's a controlled drama, right? But what happens is because you then, it's almost like you've shut everything else down and that's the over exaggeration now. And that becomes the only thing you are.
Well, it becomes your most reliable survival mechanism at that point. So like, everything you've just said, like this is a conversation I've had with her ongoing, is that things build up to a point that you're not being present with. Is it any wonder that this is the reaction?
Yeah. And seemingly it's like something small or something that's happened over and over and it's just like the same thing over and over again and you've ignored it and you've ignored it and you've ignored it and you've ignored it and then you've just gone back. Yeah. But then what happens then is, like as you said, like the pendulum swings the whole ass other direction, and what happens is then the victim turns abuser. In a you know analogy type thing, you become the one thing you don't want.
And worse, because the mechanism by which you've become said abuser is still kind of stuffed into the shadow. There's a real part of your ego that will just justify it. So, well, this is just what happens when you treat me like that.
Yeah. you know, or
like they had it coming, or like that's that revenge conversation.
Yeah, again. Exactly. I'm like this because of that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, this is just what I'm like. You need to deal with it. And a lot of the times, the people that were compliant and repressed, that's a lot of the stuff that they heard. You know, I'm like this. You just got to deal with it. You know, and stuff like that. And
which, you know,
it's
honestly, it's. So I'm just thinking of a way to say this tactfully.
Where you're using tact now?
It happens all the time. How dare you? How very dare you? As much as you would want to be accepted for you, sometimes you're the asshole.
Right.
Anytime I hear someone say, "Oh, that's just how I am," you just on you to deal with it. It's like there's a level of empowerment that does come along with that.
Yeah.
But a little bit like the overcorrection we're talking about with anger being suppressed. It's like it becomes almost an excuse to be a fuckwit.
Yeah, right. And that's it. It comes that like, well, you know, I'm just like this, you have to deal with it type thing.
Yeah.
And that is you removing accountability from yourself, or the other person removing accountability from their self by their actions, and then going, well, you know, that's a you problem. And so when you use terminology, when you do things like that, it's essentially so you can escape accountability. Because you are so far in survival mechanism, as you said, the ego is just like, we are so fucking done being treated like trash that we're just going to, you know, overcorrect to a point where we're just going to, you know, do whatever.
I'd argue that the things that you can genuinely, honestly, and heart-filteredly say, this is who I am, are so rarely things that genuinely hurt and impact other people on a negative level.
Right. So, and that's where that level of like empathy comes from, because, you know, taking it back, you are all things and all things of you, you know, so you have the capacity to, you know, you are the capacity to be all things and all things to be you.
That's the point of you.
Right. You know, but then being an empathetic human being, and when we shut down all of, you know, our nurturing, all of that sort of stuff, because, hey, you know, when you've been conditioned to be a people pleaser all your life and the pendulum swings a whole ass other direction.
Pretend like that was you and your methodology by which to stay stuck, and when you're sick of it, you just abandon all that.
Right. So, but that means that when, you know, you say, do, be something, whatever the case may be, and someone says to you, you know, what you said hurt me, or what you said upset me, or I, you know, and place that boundary down, I didn't really like how you treated me for X, Y, Z. Being an aware human being is the ability to take a step back out of yourself and go, well, shit, no, they did not deserve that. Or I can see how you felt that. Totally wasn't my intention. Like, and for that, I'm sorry, but I can totally see how that was taken out of context. And then you open up that dialogue, you know, to be able to have those conversations.
At which point, it's no longer your anger within you that's healing you. It's the anger that you see outside of you enforcing other people's boundaries about your behavior that you may or may not be accountable for even then.
Yeah.
So anger's healing you twice.
Right. Super cool.
Right? But you've got to be present for that.
And
you've got to be open to that as the thing that you're here for.
100%. And like, even I have lost a lot of friends when I, you know, hit the point and kept fucking going. You know, I hit that point where I was just done, and then I kept fucking going, and I literally became the toxic person that I didn't want to be. I was very reactive. I was very angry all the time. And I was very much like, you know, I'm like this because like I was abused as a child. And like it took a lot of people to go, no, I don't give a fuck if you're abused as a child, Sky. Like no, I'm out of here, like type thing, for me to actually go, you know, I actually don't want to be like this.
see what I mean? It's like sometimes you're the asshole. Like even all right, how should we put it?
I was very much the asshole.
I called it weaponized victimhood in a conversation the other day, when you become such a victim that you turn it into a weapon by which to burn the world around you down, even though you don't think that's your thing that you're doing.
Right. And that's it. And like I did a talk in 2018 and it literally, I said in that talk is like no amount of trauma excuses you for being a shitty person. And so it's up to you to decide who you want to be.
And what version of shitty isn't unacceptable.
Right. But then also it's like it's no one else's responsibility to put up with you being a shitty person if you're not willing to actually do something about it. Like if that's not who you want to be, or, you know, because I can hear that a lot where people are like, I don't want to be like this, I just am. And it's like, well, there's an identity statement. You might want to like reframe that.
Yeah. Like, think about that one.
You know, but like, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, well, no, actually no one has to put up with you. Like I heard a quote from another podcast I was listening to, and I cannot remember her name. So if someone listens to this and knows where it comes from, credit her, please. But she says, like, you know, don't drown yourself in 3 feet of water for someone that won't stand up in that 3 feet of water. So you like a lot of destructive, toxic, abusive relationships all come from a place of trauma, because they've come from a place of where the pendulum swung the whole ass other direction, and they've, you know, gone, I'm not dealing with this anymore, and I've just become that. And that is, you know, who they've identified with themselves now, because they've shut anything that is nurturing, loving, caring, all of that sort of stuff out, and has only, you know, projected in like manipulation, like excessive unhealthy anger, all of those sort of things. And it's just like, and then when you've shut down all of those anger things and you've over exaggerated your nurturing, your caring and all this sort of stuff, you have the beautiful ability to see, you're like, well, he's just wounded or she's just wounded and all this sort of stuff. But you will fucking kill yourself if excusing them for their, they love me, they've just had a really hard life. Fuck off. Like,
at which point that person who's so thoroughly invested in that empathy, people pleasing attitude, it then begs the question about like, oh, were they taught throughout their childhood or throughout their life that someone who can treat you like that
still loves you, and that be possible in the same person, the same set of interactions? And like, no, not really. Well, kind of yes, actually, I think, in some way, because it's like
maybe I need to say that better.
Yeah, okay.
One of those things is a lie.
Yes.
In that you'll want to believe that this person loves you, but their behavior is what their version of love looks like. I'd argue has to be a conditioned thing, because no self-aware, vaguely self-advocating person would have that level of cognitive dissonance about being treated like that and believing that that is how this person shows you love.
And
did that make more sense?
Yes, that did make sense. Thank you for clearing that up. And in that case, yes, you are right, because when you are conditioned, especially when you grow up in households, when you end up in relationships that mimic your relationship with your parents, and if those relationships are not healthy, if they're abusive or whatever the case may be, it is literally because as a child, you were taught that this is what love looks like. And
sounds familiar, right?
Fucking yes. But then also on the flip side of that as well is like, and this is something like I will fucking die on a hill, that unconditional love has been taught backwards. And this theory comes from...
I've never asked you to explain this, but...
Yeah, sorry.
If we're lucky, we're about to hear it, guys.
Okay, so this theory comes from Sven Elson, who wrote because, there's my dyslexic brain kicking in, wrote a book called There's a Hole in My Love Cup. I will get it right at some point. And he explains a lot of like generational conditioning and all of this sort of stuff. And he explains the fact that like unconditional love has been taught backwards. And
just to interrupt, we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul by having this conversation now instead of with a whole other like 3 episodes that I think are tied into this, are we?
Maybe. But
yeah, we'll go into it later.
I'll give you a real brief one and then we can really dive into it. But it's essentially saying that, and you will hear this a lot, when you hear the whole like, oh, here's your mum. Oh, here's your mum. Like, here's my English guy.
It's apparently that's very possible in modern day times. So,
Sorry.
We'll just sit with that. Yeah. You said what you said.
So she's your mum or here's your dad or, they're your auntie or uncle, whatever the case may be, right? And what essentially this is when parents treat their children poorly, they are still supposed to love their parent, no matter what. And this really leads up to then when you go into those relationships that mimic those of your childhood, is that you were taught that you had to love through abuse. That even though that person treated you like trash, that, or abused you, that whatever the case may be, you still had to love them unconditionally. But their love towards you was very conditional, which meant that if you didn't act, be, or do a certain way,
brush your teeth a little shit,
then love was removed.
Yep.
So the way that this is taught backwards is because the only form of unconditional love should be the love from a mother and a father to their child. And even if that child, and I know
I have opinions.
You have opinions. And like, yes, there are definitely, extreme circumstances and exceptions.
There's always a line in the sand somewhere.
There's always a line in the sand. But that when your child, like, even if they act out, even if they make a mistake, even if they, fuck up, even if they, leave the nest and do whatever they're supposed to do, because that's what they're supposed to do, that you still love them unconditionally. And it's actually not the child's responsibility to love the parent. They don't have to if they don't want to. If they feel like they've been mistreated and they're not getting any sort of accountability or anything like that, then like they actually don't have to love the parent back. Like I can hear your cogs turning.
I agree. I'd argue that's true of almost every relationship ever. You don't have to do shit.
No, that's it. And this is where it's been taught backwards, because when you, as a child, you're taught to love your parent unconditionally, you move into a relationship and you're taught to love that person unconditionally. But that person has fucking conditions on you.
So this is exactly why this guy had a bit of a chuckle at my experience, because this is where my opinions come in. It's like, I don't believe there is any such thing as the genuine, pure, unconditional love. Because ultimately there will be conditions and everything. Like, what happens if your child tries to stab you in your sleep?
As I said, there's a line in the
sand. But that's my point. It's like,
yeah.
I'm admittedly, I'm taking it to a very extreme example. But as soon as I hear words like should, that to me sounds suspiciously like someone else's agenda. It's like, do you love your child? Yes.
Yes.
Do you love your child even when they tried to cut your ear off because you didn't make them spaghetti for dinner? Well, I do. It doesn't mean I want to spend any time with them.
And that's the other thing.
You know what I mean?
And that's it. And like, obviously, like this will be going into like a whole nother podcast episode. But that's the thing as well. Like when we talk about things like love and unconditional love and all these sort of things, like we are conditioned that if we love someone or, I was going to say something because a lot of the times we love things half the time more than we love fucking people.
Is a dog a thing?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Good point. That they're supposed to be within your life in a presence. And then the a lot of the kickback was when we bring it back to say, you know, as I said, when I work with a lot of women who have just gotten out of toxic relationships and their mothers have been like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, you need to go back to him. You need to do this. You need to do that type thing.
Yeah.
It's like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, then you need to have a hard conversation with yourself about like, you know, boundaries and no contact and all that sort of stuff, which is like a whole.
And whose life it really fucking is.
And that's it. But then they are all like, oh, but I love my mum. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, she's your mum. But you can love her all the way over fucking there.
So there's that. And then within that conversation, I would then ask questions like, do you love your mum or do you love the idea of your mum? Is this the idea of what you're supposed to feel towards this person?
Yeah.
Or is it, no, my mum's awesome and extremely lovable and I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're not the same thing.
No, they're not. And that's something even I had to grieve, was the fact that the idea of my mum,
A lot of people do.
was not my mum. And it was like, you know, having to like break those cords and break those bonds and grieve the fact that she's just not going to be what I need or want. So,
Or what you would imagine a
Or
mum
even
would be like.
right. But yeah, so that was like a real brief on like how unconditional love is taught backwards, and that's how a lot of us get stuck into things like toxic relationships and all that sort of stuff, which then, you know, again, like if you do a certain way, then I'm not going to love you anymore. So you enter a relationship with, well, I need to, you know, be this small thing, meek, don't rock the boat, don't make anyone angry, because every time I made my parents angry, love was taken away from me.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you move into that space and then again you love beyond and through abuse, because you were taught that, well, if I acted a certain way, love was removed, but if they did, I still had to love them unconditionally.
Yeah.
And like that's a really hard bond to break, which is why when we hit that breaking point, there's that anger, that fire that gets lit to say, you are worth more, move.
It almost doesn't matter, at least initially, how you move.
No.
As long as you do something that gives you some feedback on what the hell you've just done. So we were talking a lot about like overcorrecting and trying to find the balance between the two. Like, am I the asshole or are they the asshole? It's like, well, what happens if it's not about that? But the more you practice moving, the more you can refine and define where that moving is towards, what's valuable, what makes sense, what resonates, as opposed to just bashing off the bumper like lanes at the bowling alley. You just like, hopefully you'll end up in the middle at the end when you crash into the pins / end of your life.
Right. But that, and I like to also add, I find if people have to ask if they are the asshole, 9 times out of 10, they're not the asshole.
Well, it represents a self.
Yeah. If
you're checking yourself in an attempt to double check.
It's the people that are like, no, this is, you know, like as we said, like this is just who I am. I'm like this because of that. You just need to deal with it type thing.
I mean, I 9 times out of 10. I'd even argue that often even the 1 time out of 10. So maybe you are the asshole, but this is you waking up to the idea that that's the thing, and you're cross-referencing and triangulating what your behavior actually looks like on the other side of it, because you're figuring out where the line that you want to walk is.
Yeah.
Because like, I'd argue for the person who is being an asshole, that's actually really healthy, because
Interesting.
Because you're not trusting your newly growing and defining ideas of self and what healthy behavior and
or even healthy boundaries.
All of those things.
Look
So
like.
well, and you know, like that sort of then turns into an argument about, like, well, not an argument, but a conversation about like boundaries are sometimes to keep things out, but sometimes they're to keep things in.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you do have this level of incandescent rage, the ability to ask, am I the asshole? Because if you get like at least a vaguely consistent response with that reference point and that triangulation, you can figure out, well, generally society says that crossing this line
means you're an asshole.
Probably means you're an asshole. You're not going to have many mates, let alone anyone who wants to hang out with you more than 20 minutes before you blow up again.
Yeah. But even still at the same point, like as you said, like, you know, to keep things out but also to keep things in type thing. Sometimes that's it. We need those boundaries, which, again, I think that's like our next episode. But
it's the ability to make a choice.
To go, okay, well, I'm in like rage pile right now, which means I'm going to, you know, put boundaries up and go and like, you know, scream into a pillow or go and scream into the bush.
Kick the shit out of the punching bag.
Kick the shit out of the punching bag. If, you know, if you work with me and you like the gym, I send you to the fucking gym. Like, it's...
Heavy things don't fight back. It's awesome.
Right. Fucking the best thing to regulate my anger. And I find when I work with a lot of men especially, and they're trying to, you know, create that healthy expression of anger and not like an unhealthy expression where they're like, you know, because I had got it a lot, you know, not so much, you know, in the last year or so, but in a couple of years ago when I was working with a few guys and they're like, I can't control it. And I'm like, well, that's fucking bullshit. You need to go to the gym and you need to go lift something heavy, and I want you to focus all of your anger and I want you to focus all of your rage into that bar and lift, and then come and back to me afterwards and tell me how you feel. And they'll come back and like, oh, I feel so much better. I'm like, fucking see, you can control it.
It's a diffusion. It's letting off the pressure valve.
That's
like
it.
A lot of people use crying for that.
That's it. You need to have that release. So if you are in rage pile and you need to go scream and you need to yell and you need to let it out, because that is a fucking, you need to let it out. You need to move it through. Then having that boundary to say, hey, do not come near me right now. I'm not in a good place. I'm just going to go, you know, scream into the forest, or, you know.
Howl at the moon. Devastate livestock.
Right. Go stab voodoo dolls. I don't know. But that is literally saying that, you know, I need some time and some space to regulate myself before coming in, because right now, as you said, I'm very new in this like awareness space.
And that's what I mean by like it's almost healthy in a way.
I
like
need to like
cross-reference that shit.
That's it. I know that if I'm, you know, with people and they're like constantly hammering at me, what's wrong, I'm literally just going to tell them to fuck off.
Why are you so angry? Why do you look angry? Like,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
That's
like,
it.
okay,
You should smile more. Like
it's like, well, you're about to find out why, and now it's you.
Right. And then that's where that projection comes from. So, yeah, having that sort of thing is also incredibly healthy because it allows you, one, the validation you need to express, two, the space and time you need to express and process, and then three, once you've like had that release, then you can come back and go, what are we going to do now? You know, and how do we stop this from building so far again to the point where, you know, but the fact that you are self-aware enough to know that like I need to fucking blow is like I would say enough self-awareness to go, okay, cool. What can we do different? Was that healthy? Did we,
that's what I mean, like you're creating feedback for yourself.
Yeah.
You've got some information that lets you go, well, I just did this. How did I feel about it? Well, I just punched someone in the face and kicked him in the nuts.
Not the greatest thing in the world to do, though I understand
as an
sometimes.
example, it's like, I think that might have been a bridge too far. The assault charge, not a fan.
Not a fan.
But that's, I guess, kind of what I mean is like, we also want to sort of put a caveat on it as well, in that overcorrecting or undercorrecting and progressively finding and defining that middle ground that is you. Because we don't want you to feel like the societal boundaries that might have started this whole thing, where your parents and your teachers and all this sort of stuff who told you you have to be this way.
Yeah.
We don't want that to be the gone back to limitations of yourself in how you express yourself and how you feel. It's and this is why that asking, like, am I the asshole? It's not to let everyone else tell you how you need to behave.
Yeah.
It's to give you at least some kind of reference point to go, some people thought this was a bit too far. How do I feel about that?
Yeah.
What do I actually think? Not because they've told me that this is the limit and I have to do this. It's because I don't want to go that far.
Yeah.
But I don't want to undercorrect either. Where do I sit? How do I feel about that? This is the proverbial data collection.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it right first time. And if you do, well, good for you. You probably get to transcend into light on the mountaintop next week. Tell me how.
Send me your tips. But yes, 100%. I think we've covered a hell of a lot.
Why is anger imperative to healing?
Because it gets shit done. Well, I like to say it reminds you who you are and what your worth is.
That it also very effectively creates a bit of space that you can figure that shit out with, because people will back off. So you got boundaries that work for you coming and going. Yeah,
definitely. And that's something we're going to dive into next episode, is like boundaries, which is so fun.
I think that'll be another hour plus.
Oh, totally.
Look forward to it, guys.
Yep. Be good.
Be smart.
Be kind.
Be your best you.
Yeah, you got it. No bye fights.
See you guys.
See ya.